Hey y'all, I'm Alex Campbell here for PC Gamer, and I'm here to talk about Microsoft Flight Simulator. Microsoft Flight Simulator is a lifelike flight sim that is, to put it bluntly, gorgeous. In the game you can fly anywhere in the world in a wide array of aircraft in all kinds of weather. Well, almost anywhere. For some reason the game really didn't like it when I tried to fly under the span of the Golden Gate Bridge. Flight Simulator at its core is that and just that, a flight simulator. Don't expect combat scenarios or even much of a competitive side to the game. It's really all about flying, and trust me, the management of power, communication with air traffic control, aircraft attitude, weather, navigation, and other systems are more than enough to keep you busy. If you're new to realistic flight sims or aircraft operation in general, just maintaining altitude while ATC berates you for being too high or too low is a challenge all in itself. Regardless of your piloting chops, your GPU will be doing a lot of heavy lifting though. After testing 9 different graphics cards from budget to enthusiast, I can definitely say that you can take to the skies with most recent gaming GPUs on the market. While you may only be able to get a bit over 30 frames per second at 1080p with a lower end GPU like the RX 580 or GTX 1650, the game will still look nice and will remain playable. Even so, high-end cards won't be able to reach 60 frames per second at higher resolutions without some serious compromise. Unlike fast twitch dominant games like first-person shooters, quick reactions are actually the opposite of what you want while flying an aircraft. All it takes is one overzealous flick of a joystick to send your plane into a stall, porpoise, or uncontrolled dive. Because of this, playing at 30 frames per second is actually perfectly acceptable. As far as settings go, Flight Simulator comes with 4 main settings presets: low-end, medium, high-end, and ultra. Needless to say, Ultra will tax your graphics card and make it earn its keep. However, I found the low-end settings to be quite ugly and I tried to avoid them. With level of detail and other taxing processes minimized, the game loses almost all of the visual gloss, which is half of the draw in my opinion. Between the different settings, you'll clearly be able to make out the differences in visual fidelity. But the biggest things for me were the ground detail. Flight Simulator procedurally generates a lot of smaller structures to make cities and towns look much richer. If there's a lack of good satellite data for the game to draw from, the structures and objects may look painted onto the surface of the terrain. The low-end settings preset does this more often than not and tends to only preserve the tallest of buildings and features. While this may be okay and unnoticeable while at high altitude, for a lot of airports you will be passing low overbuilt areas, so you're going to see these details. The real joy of the game comes from the challenge of operating the aircraft and looking at the scenery, whether flying over Lake Tahoe or braving thunderstorms over Nairobi. That's why, against most gaming conventions, I found that prioritizing visual quality and eye candy over raw frame rate really was the better way to go. I found the medium preset was a decent enough compromise where I really needed that extra FPS. That said, I highly suggest looking at your target preset, whether it's high, medium, or even ultra, and tweaking things down from there, especially when it comes to render scaling. Render scaling is sort of self-explanatory, but the gist of it is that the GPU renders a frame at some lower resolution and blows it up to the target resolution. For instance, a single 4K frame is about 8.23 million pixels. If you drop render scaling down to 90, the GPU will only have to render about 7.46 million pixels. Then it can just scale up the frame and do a little bit of anti-aliasing. Anti-aliasing is quite fast, but calculating geometry, textures, lighting, and effects for each pixel is really expensive. By cutting that down, you save your GPU a lot of work, which means it can spit out more frames. There is a limit though. I found that if I dropped render scaling below 70, things appeared too blurry and soft. But if you're looking to put your frame rate over 30 without dropping a ton of visual fidelity and effects, dropping render scaling to 90 or 80 will offer the best return short of using a smaller resolution. Once your frame rate gives you some room to play around, prioritize the effects that you like and try to keep them around medium or so. Personally, I didn't care much about grass and bushes, but preferred trees, shadows, and details like reflections. Soaking in the views is half the fun of Microsoft's latest iteration of Flight Simulator. It's much cheaper than buying a flight to nowhere just to snack on a comically small bag of peanuts and an uncomfortable airline seat. And frankly, LAX is really only tolerable in games anyway. Have fun and happy flying.